When you hear the words Philosopher's Stone, your mind probably jumps straight to magic, wizards, and, a certain boy with a lightning scar. But what if I told you that the most famous magical object in modern fiction has a very real and, honestly, a very strange history?
And hey, don't just take my word for it. We can start with the author herself. J.K. Rowling has been super clear that she was pulling from centuries of actual real-world belief. The Hunt for the Philosopher's Stone wasn't just a story she made up. It was the life's work for some of history's greatest minds.
So, what exactly was everyone so desperate to find? Well, it all boiled down to two incredible promises. First, the power of transmutation, the ability to turn cheap common metals like lead into pure, solid gold. And second, something even bigger, creating an elixir of life to grant immortality. I mean, infinite wealth and eternal life? Yeah, it's really no wonder people were obsessed.
And this obsession, it wasn't just some fleeting craze. Nope. This was a secret pursuit, an epic quest that spanned entire empires and went on for centuries. So let's take a look at who was actually involved in what they called the Great Work.
You see, for them, this was a way more than just a get-rich-quick scheme. They called it the magnum opus, or the Great Work. This wasn't just chemistry in a lab. It was a deep, spiritual, and philosophical mission. To create the stone was to achieve a kind of perfection, not just in a lump of metal, but within your own soul. The timeline here is just staggering. I mean, the first written mention we have of this thing goes all the way back to around 300 AD. Fast forward over 1,000 years to 1382, and the famous Nicholas Flamel, and yes, he was a real person, actually claimed he'd done it. And then, by the Renaissance, you get guys like Paracelsus who start to shift the whole point of alchemy from making gold to making medicine. But there's one really big name missing from this list. A name so famous, so fundamental to how we see the universe today, that the idea of him hunched over a bubbling pot trying to make a magic stone seems, well, almost impossible. Any guesses? That's right, Sir Isaac Newton, the man who defined gravity, figured out the laws of motion, the guy who basically laid the entire groundwork for modern physics, spent a huge part of his life secretly trying to create the Philosopher's Stone. So why isn't this common knowledge? Well, Newton kept this work intensely secret, mainly because alchemy was considered heretical, and that was a really big deal back then. His alchemical papers were hidden away for centuries, and they only resurfaced at a Sotheby's auction in London in 1936. The guy who bought them, the famous economist John Maynard Keynes, was absolutely stunned. He realized Newton wasn't just the first great scientist of the Enlightenment, he was maybe one of the last of the great magicians. Okay, so if a certified genius like Isaac Newton was convinced this was possible, what was the recipe? How on earth did they think you could actually make this thing? Let's peek into the alchemist's lab. The whole process was famously described in 4 color-coded stages. It all started with nigredo, a blackening phase. Think of it like burning something down to its essential parts to purify it. Then came albedo, a whitening, like washing away all the remaining impurities. After that was citronitis, a yellowing, which symbolized the dawn of a solar light or a kind of awakening. And finally, rubetto, the reddening, which meant you'd done it, the final successful creation of the stone. And what was this final product supposed to look like? Well, descriptions varied a bit, but they all agreed on some pretty incredible properties. Most often, it was described as a fine red or orange powder. It was said to be even heavier than gold, but it could dissolve in any liquid you put it in, and it was completely impossible to burn. Now, to even begin to understand how they thought this was possible, we have to look at how they viewed the world. The alchemist Paracelsus completely revolutionized the game by arguing that everything wasn't made of the 4 classic elements, earth, air, fire, water, but of 3 primal substances, which he called the tria prima. And this chart really helps break his idea down. He wasn't talking about literal sulfur or mercury from a mine. For Paracelsus, sulfur was the principle of combustibility, the soul, the thing that gave an object its structure. Mercury was the volatile principle, the spirit, the thing that gave it fluidity. And salt was the solid principle, the body, the thing that gave it stability. The alchemists believed that if you could just rebalance these 3 primes in a cheap metal, you could literally transform it into gold. Okay, but this brings up a really big question. Were all these brilliant minds really just trying to cook up a physical rock in a laboratory? Or was the great work something else entirely? It seems there were two main schools of thought. On one hand, you had the exoteric, or physical, interpretation. These were the people who took it all literally. The goal was real gold in their hands and a real elixir for immortality. But then you had the esoteric, or spiritual view. For them, the entire process was a powerful metaphor. The base metal they were trying to transform was the impure human soul, and the gold they were seeking was spiritual enlightenment and perfection. And it turns out this idea of a perfect, transformative stone wasn't just a Western obsession. Not at all. In Hinduism and Buddhism, you find the legend of the Sintamani, which is this amazing wish-fulfilling jewel that could purify the spirit and grant wisdom. It's a powerful parallel that really shows this is kind of a universal human desire for transformation. So, in the end, spoiler alert, they never actually found a stone that could turn lead into gold. But what they found instead, almost by accident, would turn out to be infinitely more valuable. This quote from Paracelsus really captures that crucial shift in thinking. He started arguing that the true purpose of alchemy wasn't just to get rich, but to heal people. This new focus on creating medicinal elixirs, well, it would change everything. And this is the great, beautiful irony of the whole story. In their obsessive quest for a magic stone, alchemists ended up developing the very tools and methods that would eventually kill alchemy and give birth to modern science. They invented lab equipment, they pioneered techniques for distillation and metallurgy, and they practiced meticulous experimentation. Their failures literally laid the foundation for all of modern chemistry and medicine. And what's really wild is that their dream of drinkable gold as a medicine is, in a way, becoming a reality. Today, scientists are using gold nanoparticles, that's tiny microscopic particles of gold suspended in liquid, in cutting-edge research to treat diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, and even HIV. The alchemists were totally onto something. They just lacked the 21st century toolkit. It really leaves you with a fascinating thought, doesn't it? They chased this myth for over 1,500 years, and by all accounts, they failed. But in the process of failing, they gave us the scientific method, chemistry, and modern medicine. So the real question is, did they actually fail? Or did they just stumble upon a treasure far greater than the one they were even looking for?